It's time for Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock.
Believe me when I say we have a difficult time ahead of us. But if we are to be prepared for it, we must first shed our fear of it. I stand here without fear because I remember that I am here not because of the path that lies before me, but because of the path that lies behind me. I remember that for 100 years we have fought these machines. And after a century of war, I remember that which matters most. We are still here! Tonight, let us make them remember we are not afraid!
Yeah. No fear here and declare your independence of me, Ernest Hancock, from the Sonoran Desert. Oh, we got a special guest for you today. Today. We're going to be talking with Scott Ritter. Scott Ritter was a Marine intelligence officer that served in the former Soviet Union, implementing arms control agreements, and he was on the staff of General Norman Schwarzkopf during the Gulf War. I remember that in the 90s. Oh, Schwarzkopf, he's going to go whip some ass. Where he played a critical role in the hunt for the Iraqi Scud missiles. Did he find any? I don't know. We'll find out. From 91 until 98, he served as chief inspector for the United Nations in Iraq, leading the search for Iraq's prescribed weapons of mass destruction. But he became a vocal critic against the Iraq war and that it wasn't everything they were saying it was. And once you do that, all hell breaks loose. You go anything negative about wars and rumors of wars or Israel or in the Middle East, not, America and her interest, whatever the hell that is. This is what happens. Man, they come after you. I don't want to get into all that, controversy, whatever. But what I want to do for my audience and for you guys is I want to make sure Scott gets to introduce himself a little bit. We'll go till he's boring or bored. And what we're go ahead and do is get up to speed on what's really going on in Europe, what's going on in the military, the Middle East, maybe a little China, and a lot of perception on the politics between the United States and Israel, which for the first time in my lifetime, I'm 64, born in 61, we're about the same age, and I'm telling you, this is the first time that I've seen there a crack in this U.S.-Israel thing. There's I don't know, maybe we need forever wars for forever Israel, forever, maybe not. So let's go ahead and say hello to Scott Ritter. Scott, please introduce yourself real quick. Give me the elevator for the audience so they get a perspective of your perspective, having dealt in the Soviet Union, going there, knowing about Ukraine, knowing, weapons inspector, United Nations, knowing the politics, NATO knowing. We're going to get into it so we have a base of understanding from at least your perspective on what's up. Scott Ritter, please help us out.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on. I'm the exact same age. I'm 64 years old. I'm a child of the Cold War. My parents were both career Air Force officers. And as such, this means that I traveled. I didn't stay in one place long as a child. We moved every 2 years. I went to high school in Hawaii and Turkey. I graduated in West Germany, a child of the Cold War. I grew up believing firmly that...
In the shadow of a mushroom cloud. That's what you grew up in.
100%. When I lived in Germany, we lived next door to North Point, which was a nuclear weapons storage facility for the United States military in Germany. That meant that if there was a war, that'd be the first place to be nuked by the Soviets, and we knew that. We knew that if there was a war, we were going to die instantaneously. So we literally lived under the shadow of a mushroom cloud. I was raised to believe that the Soviet Union was evil, that the communists were bad, and that it was my duty and responsibility as an American patriot to join the United States military and stand up against the forces of evil. And I enlisted in the United States Army straight out of high school at the age of 17 in 1979. I ended up gravitating towards the United States Marine Corps, went to college, got my commission, became an intelligence officer where I spent 2.5 years in the deserts of 29 Palms, singularly focused on killing commies for mommy. That was the way we talked back then, better dead than red, and we really meant it. I In college, I studied the Russian history. I was a Russian history major. I took 2 years of the Russian language. I focused on learning about my enemy. To know your enemy is to be able to better defeat your enemy. Again, guys, what I'm trying to say is I'm not somebody who just says these things. I lived this life. This was my life. My life was closing with and destroying the Soviet enemy through firepower and maneuver. And I was singularly focused on that, and I was pretty damn good at it. But in 1987, Ronald Reagan, my president, I consider myself to be a Reagan Republican, or at least I did consider myself to be a Reagan Republican. My president, a fervent anti-communist, signed a treaty with Mikhail Gorbachev, at that time the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, to eliminate an entire category of weapons known as intermediate nuclear weapons, intermediate nuclear forces. These weapons were destabilizing Europe, brought us on the brink of nuclear.
Define intermediate. Give us a range.
Sure. The intermediate range missiles will take you from, say, 500 kilometers, 300 plus miles, to just under 5,000. And so it's basically a missile that can strike. It's not intercontinental. You can't fire an intermediate range missile from, say, Europe into the United States, from the United States into Russia. It's a weapon that is used. At that time, it was an inter-European weapon, a weapon that we would deploy in West Germany and Great Britain and Italy to target the Soviet Union. And they would deploy it on Russian territory and on territories in the Warsaw Pact to target American forces in Europe. The Russians.
So if you had to do a count on missiles, it would be the intermediate would probably be the most popular one to have around.
The intermediate bridges the gap between tactical and strategic. It's a weapon. I mean, again, the SS-20, which was a Russian or Soviet intermediate missile that caused this entire problem when they started deploying in the 1970s, dramatically altering the balance of power in favor of the Soviet Union, was a road mobile missile. That means you could drive it around, raise it, fire it. It had 3 nuclear warheads. And it could destroy all of Europe. And we countered by deploying the Pershing II missile to West Germany. It could strike Moscow within 12 minutes of being fired. And then we also deployed the ground-launched cruise missile, the Tomahawk missile, the ground-launched version of that. There were other missiles involved, but the bottom line is, with these missiles deployed and the United States and the Soviet Union facing off as potential enemies in Europe, there was a real possibility of a mistake, a miscalculation, and the missile being fired in anger. And I will also tell your audience, there's no such thing as a limited nuclear war. You can't limit a war simply to a nuclear exchange in Europe. The moment nuclear weapons fly between Russia and the United States, it will always end up as a total exchange of strategic nuclear forces, and we all die. And so the decision was made to get rid of these weapons in an effort to engender stability, to bring about arms reductions. At that time, in the 1980s, the United States had 30,000 nuclear weapons deployed. The Russians had around 40,000. You need 400 to destroy the world, just so people understand. So we were well above that necessary to destroy the world. And by signing this treaty, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, we not only got rid of an entire category of destabilizing weapons, and I played an important role in this. I was actually the first inspector on the ground in the Soviet Union. My job was to monitor a Russian missile factory that produced the SS-20 missiles to make sure that they weren't producing the SS-20 missiles. I later went on to inspect SS-25 intercontinental ballistic missiles to make sure that they weren't SS-20 missiles in disguise. I helped write the book on arms control and on on-site inspection in arms control. It hadn't been done before. We were literally the first people to do it during the INF Treaty, and I was literally the first American to do it. And it was an important thing for me because I was a Marine who was ready to kill these people. That's all I wanted to do. And suddenly I was sent to live in the Soviet Union for 2 years outside a missile factory in a town.
Oh my God, they're people.
And you realize that, yeah, these are human beings. I worked with people who built these missiles. And, we collaborated together to create a treaty that worked to get rid of these missiles. And in the process, you begin to break through the armor that's created when you have governments create policies that say these people are bad. You break through that armor and you realize that when you tell a joke, they laugh. Amazing. The commies can laugh. They have a sense of humor. And then later on, they invite you into their homes and they introduce you to their wife. And you say, oh, my God, this guy loves her and she loves him. That's sort of like how we be. And they have children. Oh, geez, they have families and they believe in family values and they want good things for their children. They want peace. And you say, why do I want to kill these people? Why is it I spent my entire adult life up until this moment trying to kill these people? Isn't it more important to find a way to live together with these people in peace, especially when they're not posing a threat to us? Everything is a cause and effect relationship. Whatever the
your mic volume went way down. Something got touched or whatever.
Okay,
go ahead.
No,
we're up. It was just the volume went way down.
Whatever the Soviets were doing to prepare for war for us, we were doing to prepare for war for them. And I'm proud to say that I was part of that generation which transitioned away from being prepared daily to fight a war with the Soviet Union to a generation that said, hey, we need to be friends with these people. We need to figure out how to live in peace and harmony with these people. And that defined my life. When I finished this job in the summer of 1990, I went back to the Marine Corps and was uncertain about what I was going to do. I had joined the Marine Corps to kill Russians, and there literally was no reason to kill Russians anymore. But then Saddam Hussein invaded Iraq, and I got caught up in the Gulf War. I ended up being deployed to Saudi Arabia. I was on General Schwarzkopf's staff doing battle damage assessment. And early on in the conflict, the Iraqis were firing Scud missiles into Israel, threatening to bring Israel into that conflict, firing Scud missiles into Saudi Arabia. And I remember General Schwarzkopf's deputy, General Waller, walking into to my office, the workspaces, and saying, "Who's the missile guy? There's a missile guy in here." And that was me because of my experience in the Soviet Union. So I became the missile guy, and I got involved in some interesting things. I became heavily involved in the Scud hunt, hunting down Scud missiles, working with not just the Air Force, but Special Operations Forces, Navy SEALs, British SAS commandos, the Delta Force, and trying to interdict these missiles before they could fire into Israel, because there was a real risk of Israel joining this conflict. And if they did, the coalition that we had built to take on Saddam Hussein would have dissolved overnight, and we would have had a very difficult time winning this war. What I can tell you is that we didn't kill a single Scud missile in the entire war, no matter what people will say. It was one of the biggest lies told.
That is where the trouble started for you.
Yeah, well, that's one of the places the trouble. Trust me, the trouble began actually in the Soviet Union, because the Defense Intelligence Agency had told the President of the United States that the Russians had built like 800 SS-20 missiles, and that their declarations were that they were lying. And I went to Vodkinsk, the factory that built these, and doing what intelligence officers do, I was able to ascertain that the maximum annual production rate for that factory is between 60 and 80 missiles a year. And there was no way in hell they could produce the numbers of missiles, and it was a lie. And I wrote a paper to that effect that got a lot of attention. And I was actually summoned to the Defense Intelligence Agency. And this is as a first lieutenant, so I'm a very junior officer. And I get summoned to the Defense Intelligence Agency, where I'm seated in front of many generals and colonels who tell me I have to pull my report and change my story because I'm impacting national security issues, but more importantly, I'm impacting national security budgets. That a lot of money had been allocated to the Defense Department predicated on there being a Russian missile threat. And for me to say that there isn't a Russian missile threat put their money at risk. And I was ordered by an Air Force general to pull the report and change my story. And I told him to pound sand, with all due respect. I said, I'm a Marine, first of all. I don't take orders from Air Force generals. And second of all, I only work for my chain of command. And my chain of command is with the on-site inspection agency to the President of the United States. So if you have a problem with my damn report, go to the President. He'll go to General LaJoy, and General LaJoy will tell me to pull the report. But until that happens, I'm out of here. And I left. That was the beginning of my problems, because you, as a first lieutenant, it's not career enhancing to tell Air Force 3-star generals to pound sand. But
okay, now let's pause for a second, because I want to, do my thing here. All right. put a pin in Iraq. Scud missiles. Now, Scuds were, audience, bear with me. We're going to get to know Scott here a little bit. The Scud missile was an intermediate. Did it have that much range, or was it a short range kind of what?
The Scud missile was actually a short-range tactical missile that then the Iraqis, during the Iran-Iraq War, extended the range. The range was around 300 miles, and they extended to about 750 miles by basically cutting the missile up and then welding it together, and creating more fuel, more oxidizer, so they could fire the missile longer range. Right. So what we call a Scud missile during the Gulf War was actually a modified Scud missile, indigenously modified by the Iraqis, and a more accurate term would have been the Al-Hussein missile.
Okay. This is the reason why I asked you to define intermediate, intercontinental, tactical, artillery launched, whatever. It seems that there has been increasing use cases. We need to get us a mushroom cloud, okay? Maybe we have a little mushroom cloud, but we're getting a mushroom cloud. So in the war in Europe, a lot of it was going to be mechanized. It was going to be tanks. It was going to be mobile. It was going to, a couple of little tactical nukes take care of that, okay? So then you start having all the propaganda developing artillery-launched nukes and small ones and the, cruise missiles and the Scuds and the intermediate and then, whatever. So, and can't forget about submarines. So it seems that there has been an intentional escalation of tension, wars and rumors of wars. Were they ever really intended to be fought, prepared to be fought? There's something behind this. Now, the reason I wanted to pause is I do this often. I didn't anticipate doing it with you, but since we're going to go until you're boring or bored, we got time to do this one thing that I like to do, is ask why. And the reason is because when you have a person such as yourself, a Marine, yes, sir, I do it this way, sir, how high, sir, and you go in and you're confronted with not necessarily your chain of command, but you're doing it wrong, Scott. Lieutenant, get with the program of whatever the program is. So what happens is you say no, based on some criteria, truth, justice, the American way, Marine code, whatever. So then it comes in, not everybody does that. In fact, fewer and fewer of these type of people are able to stand up to this kind of headwind. So this is where I come in and I go, why? Why were you that way? What grandma, uncle, book you read, movie you saw, something. Somebody influenced, somebody set a standard, somebody, and all, since then, of all of them, and they're gone after you, and you just, come back, doing, I am here, say my piece. There is something in that I need to understand so we can bottle it. Put it in the education system. Make a movie about it. Do a cartoon for it. Train the little kids. Put it in the feed on their iPhone. Something that made you resistant to this kind of pressure. We don't have to spend a big, giant, long, your childhood kind of thing. But, there are things in your life that have it to where those kind of instances come up. We birth another Scott Ritter. You see my point? What was it? Why?
I think it's my parents and the system that I grew up in, a military system that was predicated on honor and integrity. You say you don't want to go into my childhood, but let me put it this way. When growing up,
do as enough as you need. I don't need a movie, but whatever you need to explain yourself.
No, but as a child, I just remember when I woke up in the morning, opened my eyes, there were two framed posters on the walls of my bedroom. One was of John F. Kennedy, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." And so from the very beginning, I was raised to be someone who was going to give back to my country. The second one was the code of conduct. I am an American fighting man, et cetera, et cetera. But basically that under no circumstances do you yield. Even when tortured, you must adhere to a code of conduct that is predicated on honor, on integrity. And my dad raised me that way. I mean, I'm not saying that, Scott Ritter was a perfect child. Actually, today,
No,
knowing
there's these little influences. What was it that your father and your mother, what was their job in the military? What did they do?
my mom was a nurse. She dealt with premature babies, which is a difficult form of nursing, but she was a nurse, and my father was an aircraft maintenance officer. He kept airplanes flying. Um, he's not a war hero. He's not, a commando and all this stuff. He's just a guy that woke up every morning and kept airplanes flying. Sometimes he was getting mortared in Vietnam. Other times he wasn't. But that, but the point
Important role. Keep the airplanes flying.
well, he was a commissioned officer, and that's the important part, is that he had an obligation to his country, to the Air Force, to adhere to code, certain standard. I'll just tell you a quick story that sort of tells you everything you need to know about my father, me, and childhood. In high school, I got in ninth grade, I got in a big fight. Three guys insulted my sister, and I went after them. And the teacher had a hard time pulling me off of them. I ended up in the principal's office, and he was asking me why I was fighting these guys and why I wouldn't stop when the teacher said. And I said, because they insulted my sister. And he said, well, could there have been anything that your sister had done that could have led to the insult? And I went across the table at him at that point in time, and I had to be pulled off of him. He called my phone, and he said, your son's in the office. My father said, okay, why are you calling me? He said, well, your son was in a fight. My father said, why are you calling me? He said, well, don't you want to know about this? My father said, was my son in a fight? He said, yes. He said, is there a punishment for fighting? He said, yes. He said, what is the punishment? He said, it's minimum 3 days suspension. My father said, why are you calling me? And the implication was, if my son got in a fight and the penalty for fighting is 3 days suspension, then suspend him and don't call him. So I suspended. And I went home and I was furious. I couldn't believe my dad didn't stick up for me. My father met me at the door and he said, first of all, I want to let you know that I'm very proud of you, that you did the right thing. You stood up for your sister, and that family means everything. You did absolutely what was necessary. He said, but here's the thing. You took an action. It's an honorable action, but that action is meaningless unless you're willing to pay the consequences of that action. That if you're going to do something and it's consequence free, then it doesn't mean anything. He said, you made a decision to fight for your sister's honor, and now you're going to be suspended for 3 days. And there was no way I was going to prevent that from happening, because you have to learn this lesson. When you do something, even if it's right, you must pay the price for what you do. And that's the price of honor. That's the price of integrity. And that was one of the best lessons my father ever taught me, was that and so that's what it was. And, when I was in the Marine Corps, it's all about honor, integrity. It's about doing the right thing by the Constitution, by your Marines. And I was trained as an intelligence officer in the Marine Corps intelligence system that telling the truth is the most important thing. If you lie, they die. That was the mantra that was bred into my head. If I lie to please my bosses, Marines will die. My job was not to make my bosses happy about what I was saying. My job was to tell the truth to my bosses and let the chips fall where they may. It's up to my bosses to take this truth and make appropriate decisions. But they won't make appropriate decisions if I lie to them, if I shield them from the truth, if I try to make them happy. If they want to hear something and I say what they want to hear, even though that's not the truth, then they will do things that cause Marines to die. So the Marine Corps taught me, and I was ready to receive this lesson, that truth is an absolute. That you adhere to this truth, you stand by it, and based upon what my father taught me, you stand up for the truth and you be prepared to pay the consequences of the truth. Because telling the truth in a consequence-free world is, it sort of, it takes away from the point. If you're going to tell the truth, especially when it's a difficult time, it's only meaningful if you're willing to pay the price for telling the truth. And so that's what led me to be who I am, and that's why.
Thank you. That gives us a good explanation. A couple other things along these lines I wanted to just kind of get to know you. Two things. One, do you have a family, wife, kids, that kind of stuff, and what their opinion of this, how it affects? Because I know how it is. As a political activist and whatever, it affects family too. The other thing is, what rank, at what level in the military does truth, honor, justice, American way, whatever, start to wane? You know, I mean, they started trying to groom you at lieutenant, saying, "Oh, you're not." I mean, are these people elevated and put up? And it's just recently, last week, we have, days ago, we had Hegspeth and Trump bringing in all the generals, and I'll explain it to you, you know. And I'm not sure what they explained, other than, you know, we're not, you know, guys in dresses anymore, but this truth, justice, American way, honor, code of whatever, when does that stop? What rank? What year? What era? What? Because we're not there now. I'm sure there's a bunch of, I'm sure the U.S. military, you know, they want elite whip ass. They got a long enough list they can pick from. But, you know, in general, something's happened. And I'm wondering, at what level does that happen? You know, from your experience, share with us on that. Oh, we lost him. Hopefully he'll come right back. Dang it. So we'll go ahead and get him back, because that's a good question. You know, that's a really good question. Let me go, and it's severed. That's too bad. That was build up to what I really wanted to get into. We'll get into the Donna. We lost connection. Check and see if he's coming back or can. They're having issues. That's why we got a late start there to begin with. The one of the things that I always do when I talk to these people is, I didn't know that I was going to do that this time, and this was a good opportunity. When you have the resistance to the truth, when you have resistance to doing your job, you know, and having taken an oath to the Constitution, understanding, you know, growing up in the shadow of a mushroom cloud, which was a Queen song, Hammerfall, grew up in the shadow of a mushroom cloud. I always remembered that song because it was at a time in the late 70s, early 80s, you're going, man, can we just, you know, the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. We had the cancellation of U.S. participation in Moscow Summer Olympics. You got, you know, Red Dawn, the movie with Charlie Sheen and Patrick Swayze comes out, and, you know, and a lot of it kind of rang true, but it was certainly propaganda of, you know, what the people have to contend with the government saying, you know, this is how we're going to do it, and you got to do it, and we're prepping you for doing it. And you have a slippery slope that goes towards what? Wars. Rumors of wars. When you have an economic downturn, when you have civil unrest, when you have, they always default to war. And when you have all of the different variations of war, different levels of war, mechanisms of war. Recently, James Corden and I kind of came up with, we were kind of trying to come up with a slogan, a meme of what, and then you know, finally one of the audience came up with a good idea. Nuclear war, comply no more. This is kind of government failed. I see a mushroom cloud, you're done. Your whole purpose was to prevent that. You know, this mass killing of human beings on either side. You know, they're not all combatants. You know what I mean? So I'm just going, this is not going to be business as usual after you see a mushroom cloud on the battlefield. When that happens, it's done. You know, my compliance with a government that, you know, in a nuclear war means you failed miserably, and mostly from getting our nose in places it shouldn't be anyway. And then when you go and comply, you know, you check, you go see what's up. Yeah, here he's coming back. Then you're like, and what do you say you do here? What is it that you add to our life? What is it? Well, if it's not the security and the rights of the individual, then what do you say you do here? You're not gonna work here anymore. So this is why I wanted to have this show. Scott's back now. We had a disconnection there. But the question is still fresh in my mind. is at what point does the truth become secondary? At what point do the requirement of being in charge of men to go fight and die and kill and whatever, at what point does the truth not so honorable? Your goal is different. You change. Was it an era? Was it a time? Was it, Daddy Bush in Iraq? Was it Baby Bush in Iraq? Was it? Or has it always been? And is the military there and the ethos that they're brought up in is kind of a bulwark against the corruption? Or is it part of it? And where are we now? You see my point? You know how people that are brought up in your childhood with military family, is that even there now? And when I don't know what your support is of Hegspeth being up there and yelling at generals, was that camouflage for a little secret meeting, everybody in person of a smaller group? But I need to know where it went wrong, where lying was a minimum job requirement in the military.
Well, I think it's important to realize that the military ideally is supposed to be apolitical. I've said that I was a Ronald Reagan fan, but I joined the military under Jimmy Carter, and I wasn't a big fan of Jimmy Carter, but it didn't matter. He was my commander in chief. I obeyed the Constitution. I obeyed the orders. Later on, I served under Bill Clinton. Not my favorite guy, but as a military guy, my job is to obey the commander in chief, obey the orders. Obey the Constitution, adhere to the Constitution. And you can't serve in the military unless that's your mindset. If you join the military saying that I'm Donald Trump's man, you're not joining the American military, because the American military isn't about serving Donald Trump. The American military is about serving the American people, defending the Constitution.
Is it? This is kind of the point that I'm getting to.
Well, it is. I mean, whether or not people will live up to that standard is another question. I would say that Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us all in his farewell address in 1961 about the dangers of the military-industrial complex. He called it the military-industrial congressional complex, that America was becoming addicted to defense industries, addicted to the money that comes from that. Yeah. As a result, we needed to have foreign policies that were in search of enemies, because we needed enemies to justify the weapons that we were then building using the money taken from the American taxpayer. And that this has a corrupting influence on American politics, and it does. The problem is in the military is as you advance through the ranks, it's very easy to adhere to constitutional standards when you're doing the basics, when you're leading the men and women who you're honored and privileged to lead as a commissioned officer. Or if you are one of the enlisted ranks, you have the honor of serving your country and defending that Constitution. And you end up serving and defending the person to your left and the right. There's a singular focus on staying alive and accomplishing the mission, and the mission is staying alive. So it's when you start to make that transition away from troop leading into, you get into the lower levels of management, and then, intermediate levels of management and senior levels of management. And these levels of management bring you into the realm of money. Company commanders don't manage, $1 million budgets. They lead companies. Battalion commanders lead battalions, but they now have to be mindful of money they spend. They have battalion budgets, training budgets, operational budgets. They have to adhere to these budgets. And as you advance through the ranks, money becomes a thing, the politics of money. And this is where I believe many military officers lose their way, especially those officers who interface with the military-industrial complex and interface with the congressional halls of power, the people that allocate that money. It's a necessary part of the job. We can't live without this kind of interaction. But officers forget that they're not here to make defense industries rich or to make Congress happy. They're there to adhere to the Constitution and to serve the men and women under them to make sure they have the best weapons possible, best training possible, etc. But every individual acts in different ways to different stresses. And oftentimes what happens is people get up to that rank of, you make major and you're like, hey, I got through the company grade stuff. I'm now a field grade officer. This is cool. But then you want to make lieutenant colonel. And to make lieutenant colonel, you have to go through a lieutenant colonel board that suggests you're capable of battalion command. But we always believe that if you're going to promote somebody, they have to be prepared to do the next job up, which means they have to ask the question, not only can they command a battalion, but can they function at the intermediate level, the colonel level? And that means you have to be politically inclined. Is this person capable of operating in a politically charged environment? And now they're starting to ask the wrong questions. And so you may be this fantastic officer who worked their way up through the ranks, but now you're up for consideration, lieutenant colonel, and politics comes into play. And when we start talking about politics, that concept of alignment comes into play. Are you on the team? And the team is defined by your political master, the civilian. Are you on Team Democrat? Are you on Team Republican? Are you a team player? And at this point in time, if you say, I'm here to serve the Constitution and do what's right for my country, if you don't have political leadership that respects that, because this is a two-way street, we need the political leadership to respect the independent nature and quality of the officers who serve in the United States military. But when political leaders start to look to those officers saying, if you want that star, you got to do what I want you to do. You got to do what the politics demand. And unfortunately, too many people want that star and they're willing to make the changes. Not everybody. There are honest people, but I will say that there was a transition that took place after the Gulf War back in 1991-92. I was part of this. I lived through this transition. In the Marine Corps, people were talking about the peace, not just the peacetime Marines, but the peace dividend, that we had to give the American people a peace dividend. Well, with all due respect to the American people, my job isn't to bring you a peace dividend. My job is to save you, to defend you. Your job is to give me the weapons necessary to do that, and allow me the ability to train to do that. My job isn't to make you happy. My job is to defend you. And you have to decide how much resources you want to allocate. But the script was flipped, and we were told we're transitioning away from the Cold War era military, and we have to start to downsize, and we have to start to look for peace dividends. And literally
define that peace dividend. When someone in the military, we were creating a peace dividend. I remember when they yacked about that. Okay, let me go ahead and inject here a little bit. When the peace dividend came, it was after the Cold War. We're going to have, truth, justice, American way, chicken in every pot, and single earner at home with a white picket fence and kids, riding their bicycles. So I'm like, okay. Then came personal computers and cell phones. We had the peace dividend where we shouldn't have been spending all this money on the military. And then we had, to the degree whatever we needed, whatever, politics decide, Lockheed Martin decides that is. But you had the increase in productivity for the American people through digital storage of knowledge, access to information, communication, all of this productivity that went down to the small businessmen, that went down to the family, that went down to the farmers, that went down, through technology. We had an enormous opportunity to have a dividend, to have lower taxes, less government, less, consternation around the world, but that didn't happen. All of the increase in productivity from communication and from computers and from not having, wars that were supposedly, when have we not had a war, but that never materialized. And I'm going, why? What was the peace dividend they were talking about? That's the one that I was looking forward to, was a life of abundance, because we can. I mean, the American people, why do you go rob the bank? Because that's where the money is. Well, why are they coming after the middle class in America? Because that's where the money is. And all this saving the petrodollar, and we can go on and on about that, and that sure has, a lot to do with this. But I'm looking, when you say peace dividend, I need to know what their definition, who they are that were saying that. What do you think it meant?
Well, I'll tell you, again, from my perspective, it meant that the the money we spent to defend ourselves during the Cold War was no longer needed because the threats that existed in the Cold War no longer manifested themselves. And so that we would restructure the military, resize the military, re-optimize the military to a new reality that didn't require strategic bombers in the air all the time, ballistic missiles on standby alert, ready to spin up me training. I mean, when I told you I was in 29 Palms, all we did is train. Literally, I was in the field more than 270 days a year training. That's why we were so good. We trained. My battalion fired more live artillery rounds in 1 year than the entire Marine Corps fires today. That's the kind of training we were doing. It's very expensive. And I was always against the concept of a peace dividend. I did believe in re-optimizing, but let me tell you why I was against the peace dividend. In the intelligence world, we had very good intelligence capabilities during the Cold War. What happened when I transitioned for instance, when I was a weapons inspector in the Soviet Union, I could go to the CIA and with an observation, and I would be taken to an analyst who had spent his entire career looking at a very specific part of the ground, explain what I had seen. He would bring perspective to it. And together we would come up with what turned out to be a very accurate assessment of what was really going on. But in order to do this, I needed that expert on the ground, that person sitting behind a desk for 20 years straight doing that same thing. But the peace dividend said, well, we don't need a guy behind the desk doing that anymore. We're going to hire people and we're going to, make them do mini jobs.
Contract that out, yeah.
And so what happened then when I was in Iraq as a weapons inspector, I'd go to the same CIA people to say what's going on this site, and they'd bring somebody there who had 6 months experience. And they'd show me a photograph and start talking about the photograph, and I'd have to stop them and say, no, you see, I'm the guy on the ground. That's not what's happening. You're not giving me any insight. But see, they were supposed to be the jack of all trades, the master of none. And this is what happened with the peace dividend. We just faked it. We said we were cutting, but what we cut was real capability. We didn't actually increase, productivity or professionalism or output. We actually ended up spending the same amount of money. We saved no money, and we ended up getting a much worse product. In the Marine Corps, we were trained from day one to be leaders. That's all it's about is leadership, leadership, leadership. I mean, you start off as a second lieutenant, it's leadership in your brain. Suddenly here I am, a mid-level captain coming off of a war where we had performed very well. And the Marine Corps transitions into what they call total quality management. And all of us leaders looked at each other and said, what the hell is total quality management, TQM? Well, that's the way we're going to do business. We're going to use Lotus Notes on computers to communicate, and it's going to be very efficient. And I said, this may work in IBM, but what makes the Marine Corps isn't what I do behind a computer screen. It's what I do in front of my Marines. It's the leadership that I impose on my Marines. We don't manage Marines. We lead Marines. And I think this was a problem in mindset, too, that, when you talk about a peace dividend, this business mindset began to take charge in the military. We began a business. The moment you're looking for a dividend is the moment you become a business person and not a combat leader. And the military must be about producing combat leaders because that's the only reason we exist. We don't exist to make Lockheed Martin money. We don't exist to put extra dollars in the American taxpayer's pocket. We exist to save you from a threat, from an enemy, to preserve and protect and uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. And somewhere in the 1990s, during the presidency of Bill Clinton, we lost focus on that primary mission.
Thank you for that. And that kind of brings us up to what we just saw here recently a few days ago with all the generals being brought in. And I'm wondering what the message was. I mean, I watched it, I get it, we're not doing that, dudes in dresses no more, and we're not, and we're a warrior machine, we're going to be warriors, and we're going to train for warrior. And I'm going, okay, there was no clapping, there was no response from the audience, they're like, why am I here, And I was shocked at how many there were, hundreds. I'm going, have we always had that many generals? Holy crap, who does anything? So I'm just going, the people that were there, what percentage do you think are appointments of, Clinton, Obama, Biden? What kind of changes? What's the numbers? Is there any generals that are going, yeah, like you, I'm a Marine. I'm freaking Navy SEAL in charge of Space Force of coastal whatever Army go kick ass, Air Force bombing, we do our job kind of guy. Are they there anymore? And what percentage are they? I need to have an understanding of if and when things happen and we got to go and implement the policy and protect America and her interests, whatever the hell that means. I'm wondering, what are we drawing on? Is it politics? Is it, New York Times polling data? I mean, what is it that the military has become? I got the impression, the Secretary of Defense and President wanted, it's a new day. We're going to whip ass, whatever the hell it is that they're, trying to do. But I want to know where we are now, in your opinion. You have gone head up against these guys. Truth is not a thing. Honor, that truth thing, the honor kind of, it's in the way. I've seen this erosion. I'm old enough. I've been involved. I'm a political activist, since the late 80s. I can see what's happening. I know the criticism of the Clinton administration and, how much they didn't love on the military enough. But I don't even know what that means. But what I do see, when you got, freaking people in charge and high levels of in charge, and they're trans, gay, makeup, God, what the shit? I am looking, from around the world, they're looking at the U.S. going, what the hell is wrong with these people? I'm asking you, what's wrong with it, and how pervasive is it, and how can it be rooted out? Should it be rooted out? Help me out. How did we get to where we are now, and where are we?
The United States military that the American people have today is a military that's created by the American people. If you want to blame anybody for the United States military, blame the American people, because the American people vote for members of Congress, and it's Congress that drives
supposedly
many of these. Well, supposedly, in theory. But the point is, we just have to look at the calendar. The very few of these generals are, if I were still in the military today, I'd be on the cusp of mandatory retirement. That means that the generals that enlisted in the late 70s, early 80s, served in the Cold War, got their comeuppance during the Gulf War, et cetera. They're aged out. They're done. They're finished. So we have the vast majority of our senior leadership came in during this period of transition that I spoke of during the Clinton administration. Where we transitioned from Cold War era, traditional military values to this new military. And you can't blame the person who joins the military. I mean, you're a lieutenant, you join, you want to lead troops, you go out there and you lead troops, but suddenly you're told that the Secretary of Defense, who's a civilian, operating under pressure brought on the Department of Defense by the United States Congress, that we can't have, we have to suddenly allow homosexuals into the military. Now, I'm not here to say yay, nay on that. None of my damn business. I'm just saying that as a lieutenant, you don't get a vote. You're suddenly called into a battalion formation and told the policy has changed. It's now don't ask, don't tell. If we find a homosexual in the ranks, we don't beat them up. We don't kick them out. We don't ask, don't tell. And you go, okay, that's the military. That I'm going to obey my order, and you begin to and you adjust on that. You don't get as much training. You're told that now that instead of being in the field 270 days a year, to save money, you're going to do a lot of simulation. You're going to bring in a lot of computer stuff. We don't do battalion formations as much anymore because they don't want us running through the base housing, waking up the housewives, singing our chants. And we can't sing the chants that we used to because we're not allowed to use that language. And the Marines that start coming in aren't the same Marines because Congress says we can't hit Marines anymore. We can't get in their face. We have to give them a yellow card so they have a timeout. This is Congress imposing this will on the Marines. It's not the Marine Corps saying this is what we want. The Marine Corps does what they're told to do by their civilian leadership. So does the Army, so does the Navy, so does the Air Force. And yet the professionals adjust to this, because when the time comes for them to perform, the United States military has always performed at the highest possible level. And the people who performed in the 1990s, in the early 2000s, in 2010, are the people wearing stars today. The medals you see on their chests were not given to them because of DEI. It was given to them because they put their lives on the line in combat to do a job that they were ordered to do by civilian leadership. It doesn't mean that they supported the war. It doesn't mean that they caused the war. It means they were ordered to go over and do a job, and they did the job. And the vast majority of the men and women who sat in that auditorium were honorable American heroes who have served their country honorable. You say, were they? It's like, look, if you're a general today, you probably were appointed during Barack Obama's time, or maybe you were appointed during George W. Bush's time initially. You definitely, a lot of those generals were appointed during Trump's first administration, and many of them were appointed during Biden's administration. That doesn't mean that they're political by necessity. It just means that that was the commander-in-chief at the time of their appointment. Now, we know that during the Biden administration, there was a lot of emphasis placed on DEI, diversity, equity, and I don't know what
inclusion.
Inclusion. This is something that's imposed on the military. It's not that the military woke up one day and said, "We want dudes in dresses." I can guarantee you, if the military had a vote, there would be no dudes in dresses, because most of the military recognizes how that undermines, the morale and stuff. But the military must obey the orders that it's given by civilian leadership, especially if those orders have been deemed to be constitutional in nature. And when told that you have to, bring about DEI, that's what you do. It's not that you're sitting there and suddenly are a cheerleader for it. The military obeys lawful orders. That's what the military does.
Okay. So your opinion is these hundreds of generals, admirals, whatever are sitting out there, there's not going to be a lot of resistance to masculine up the military. Is that your opinion?
Well, again, what my opinion is this: the military is a system. I will tell you right now that Pete Hegseth's tactics will not work, because that's not how it works. The Secretary of Defense does not call in his senior leadership and treat them like children. The Secretary of Defense, first of all, must work with the service secretaries, the Secretary of the Army, Air Force, Navy, to come up with concepts, what needs to be done. They generally receive their concepts, their directions, based upon the laws enacted by the United States Congress. So for Hegseth to come right off of the bat and say, "These politicians stink, they're the worst, I hate them," what he's saying is he doesn't care about the Constitution, doesn't care about civilian leadership. Only civilian leadership he cares about is him and the President of the United States. It doesn't work that way. The taxpayer pays Pete Hegseth through monies allocated by Congress, who still controls the purse under the Constitution. If you want to make changes, Pete, what you do is you go through your service secretaries, who then put a memorandum down to the generals and admirals that you just shamed, and you say, "This is what we want done." They will then come up with ideas on how to do it based upon reality. It's a bottom-up approach, so that when you issue that directive, everybody's in agreement that that directive, A, makes sense, and B, can be implemented. But you don't stand in front of 800 of our most senior people and insult them the way he did. This was 100% the wrong way. I agree with about 70%.
Why do you think he did it that way? I mean, this is a political thing. This was an announcement. This was, there was before and there was after the speech. There's something. It was a message to somebody. Who?
It's a message to the President of the United States. This was Pete Hegseth. Let's just remember that he was, a field-grade officer who had some experience, but not the greatest experience in the military. He didn't become Secretary of Defense because he has managed billion-dollar budgets. He didn't become Secretary of Defense because he has managed millions of men globally. He didn't become Secretary of Defense because he's some budget wizard. He became Secretary of Defense because he's a Fox News host that Donald Trump liked. And so Trump wanted to surround himself with people that he trusted, he could control, and he picked Pete Hegseth. And the compliant Senate ratified him as Secretary of Defense. It was the worst decision that's been made in modern history when it comes to the defense of the United States of America. Pete Hegseth is singularly unqualified to be in the job that he's in. He doesn't understand any of the aspects, because this is his first time. You don't want the first time a Secretary of Defense is confronted with a specific problem set to be while he's Secretary of Defense. The reason why he's Secretary of Defense is that he has experiences, whether in the military or in a civilian capacity. He's familiar with the nuances and the complexities of this trillion-dollar enterprise we call the United States military. And Hegseth simply isn't familiar with it, and every aspect of his presentation reflected this reality. He was lost in the past. He was focused on his experience as a troop leader. He thinks that it's okay for a defense secretary to go out and do hard PT with the troops. The defense secretary loses stature when you go out and do hard PT with the troops, because that's not your job. Your job isn't to go and do push-ups and pull-ups. That's not in the job description of the Secretary of Defense. And I would remind Pete Hegseth that when he talked about fat generals, and he sat there and everybody went, "Oh yeah, we can't have fatties in the military." I agree, we can't. Curtis LeMay, cigar chomping Curtis LeMay, was a fat body. Are you going to tell me he's not a warrior? You're going to tell me that he didn't win the air war against Germany? He didn't bring nuclear weapons down on Japan? That he wasn't the guy who was promoting air power with JFK during the Cuban Missile Crisis? Pete Hegseth couldn't hold a candle to Curtis LeMay, but Curtis LeMay couldn't pass a PFT. General Patton, one of the greatest combat leaders of our time, he didn't run a PFT the entire Second World War. He couldn't run a PFT. He wasn't physically qualified to run a PFT.
Yeah, I didn't get that impression. I mean, of course, they were, trying to set a new standard. I'm just wondering what that is. And it's war. We're warriors. We're war fighting. We're going to be prepared. We're going to go whip ass, as opposed to, I don't know. Is there anything else for the military? Is just go whip ass when I tell you to whip ass, and better be able to whip ass, or is there something else?
Well, when I was doing the weapons inspection business, I would go to Hercules, which is a missile manufacturing enterprise in Magna, Utah, and I would go to Morton Thiokol, produced missiles, the Peacekeepers, etc. And I would go down there to talk about missile production. And at each facility, there were Navy and Air Force officers attached to this facility to make sure that the contracts of producing the missiles were done properly, met the military standard. That's not kicking ass and taking names. That's doing a job, managing. The guys who, work with defense industry to come up with the next generation of aircraft, who come up with the concepts, who predict the future. What is the world going to look like in 10 years? Will we have the right weapons for that? If you're down there doing push-ups and pull-ups and worried about jabbing a bayonet in somebody's gut, you're not prepared to do that. The military isn't all about closing with and destroying the enemy through firepower and maneuver. It's about making sure that we have a system capable of supporting those few who are given the task of closing with and destroying the enemy.
Well, it's standards. I give you an example. This is something that kind of stuck with me one time. I can't remember what it was, 2020 or 60 Minutes thing or something. They were it was in the 90s. They're going to West Point. And they go to West Point, and they got a cadet, and they're all spit and polished and heel clicking, whatever to everything. And, of course, they selected this one young man to be an example. And they asked him straight up, they go, why is it that you get on everybody and they got, extra PT, or they got to do latrine duty or whatever because they didn't put the cap back on their toothbrush or something? I mean, little stuff like that. And he goes, because attention to detail, the standard, is so important when you're calling in an artillery strike. And he goes, it's the standard of discipline that you're looking for that carries on to all these other things that you're talking about. And we get to where they go to you and, your report's kind of not what we wanted there, Lieutenant. Get on it, Lieutenant Ritter, and do what we... So I'm looking at it, in the rose-colored glasses of that. Was there a new standard set? Was there an attempt to try and, we're not this anymore, we're this? The page is turned. We're setting a new... From your perspective, I'm getting that, Hegseth shouldn't be there. He's not experienced enough to be, and kind of doesn't understand how, whatever. And I'm not really looking... I'm sure there's a lot of people that can help with that. If he's out there doing push-ups with the privates, yeah, whatever, I don't care. But the point that I'm looking for is a standard, a new, that encourages the Scott Ritters, that when somebody comes up with a justifiable, I remember there's a movie, I don't know, Midway, you know, those old World War II movies or whatever. Some guy goes in to the aircraft carrier captain and he says, look, you're docking using the airplane engines to move it into position, and you're wasting all these hours and times on these fighter aircraft to dock your freaking ship. Do you really want to push this, boy? Well, no, I guess not. I just want to make sure you knew. Well, of course, he loses respect, you know, for not pressing his conviction of what he knows to be in service of keeping the machines flying. So it's all these things come into my mind of growing up, you know, with all of this, how the military is portrayed in the media, the propaganda of, you know, whatever news outlet you got, and so on. And I saw this as a break in whatever it was, which that's what I wanted to ask you. What the hell is it? And to where it needs to be based on a standard of excellence, a standard of discipline, a standard of not this political DEISG, whatever the hell is going on. So that's why I want to ask you where it is, regardless of what happens because of what Trump and Hegseth did. Where are they now? These guys that were walking in there, you're saying that from the Iraq wars, from actual participation and boots on the ground kind of stuff, these guys have come in and they're there to do the job. Are you confident in the military now to be able to wage war? Is it a Congress thing? Is it a people thing? Is it too many young kids blue face all the time with their phone and tablet? Is it, where are we now? Before we get into Russia and Ukraine and the Middle East and all that, I appreciate you giving me this background here because I need to understand your perspective and why. That's why you're here. This is important so we understand why you're saying what you're saying with Putin, with Zelensky, with the Middle East, with Israel. They're going to bomb in Qatar while they're in a peace negotiation. How about, wow, okay, whatever. Iran, you know, bombing, you know, all this. But I need to know where you think we are now. The quality of the people with stars on their, you know, boards on their shoulder, and what you think we in danger? Are we needing this kind of standard change? Did it make it worse? Let me know what you think where we are now as we have the threat of freaking nuclear mushroom cloud. Share with me.
Well, I'm here to say that Private First Class Schmuckatelli in you know, X company of Y battalion of X regiment of the, you know, whatever Marine division is prepared to load onto whatever craft he will load on, whether a helicopter, a landing craft, an LCAC, whatever, and you cross the line of departure, disembark, and engage the enemy in mortal combat. And I have to respect the hell out of that. And I have to respect the hell out of the corporal and the sergeant that's leading Private First Class Schmuckatelli, because they are going to be alongside him. So is their lieutenant and their captain. And they train every day to the extent they're permitted to train to prepare for this mission. And they are ready for this mission. Could they be better prepared? It costs money. And it's not their fault they're not getting the money they need to be better prepared. That's the fault of the United States Congress and the fault of senior leadership who finds, or who are told that they have other, you know, priorities that they have to line up with. I'm confident that the battalion commander is ready to lead his or her battalion into combat to do what is necessary to execute the military orders that they're given. I'm confident that their brigade commanders and their division commanders are ready to issue the appropriate orders so that these guys can carry out their task. I'm confident that when given the orders, the American men and women who serve in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard, Space Force will give their lives for their country, and we have to respect that. We cannot denigrate that. These are men and women who have done what the vast majority of Americans won't do. They have volunteered to serve, to put on the uniform, to go into harm's way if called upon to do so. Now, what we have to ensure is that the framework around which this honorable service is defined is a framework that's worthy of the sacrifice that these men and women are ready to make. And I would say that, no, we're lacking. We're lacking because we're not given the money and the resources to train. We're not given the emphasis to train that we used to have. And that's a matter of resource allocation and competing requirements. But this
So
is,
it's not necessarily a dollar amount that you're saying. It's an allocation of the resources and, waste, fraud, and abuse. Well, I don't even, I throw a dart and, and it'll hit waste, fraud, and abuse. So is that kind of what you're talking about? Or you say, we just need more congressional money? Open up the
it's not about
purse.
money at all. Actually, I think we can actually cut the defense budget by about 60% and have a better combat capable military focused on the right things. But so much of the defense budget's into waste, fraud, and abuse, as you said, because we've built a system in peacetime that isn't prioritized for the needs of the war fighters, but needs of Congress. When we have the United States Congress telling the United States Air Force that they have to keep aircraft production lines open, not because the Air Force wants the airplane. The Air Force saying, we don't want that airplane anymore. But Congress says, no, you got to keep it open because of jobs. So now we have to keep that thing open, cranking aircraft out that the Air Force doesn't want, doesn't need. But the American taxpayer is going to pay for it because a certain congressional representative is more worried about winning re-election and understanding how difficult it will be to win re-election if they close down this factory. That's where we lose a lot of money. We lose a lot of money in the inefficiencies of defense industry, which have been allowed over time to low bid on contracts and then ride the contract out, suddenly say, oh, no, costs have gone up. And next thing you know, what was supposed to be, a $10 million airplane is a $100 million airplane. Let's look at the Sentinel missile, the new replacement for the intercontinental ballistic, the Minuteman III. It was supposed to cost, $75 billion. When they first announced it, I said, this is $1 trillion missile, and they'll never be able to build this missile because our system isn't built to do that. It's built to milk money from the American taxpayer, not produce weapons for the American warrior. And look at what has happened. Congress has put a halt on it because the thing has quadrupled, quintupled in price. They don't have the technology. Our defense industry has gotten rich lying to the American taxpayer. It's time we stop supporting Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, and we stop believing politicians that say that when Palantir stands next to Pete Hegseth, who stands next to the president saying we can build a Golden Dome missile defense shield, understand that we can't, and if we tried, it's going to cost trillions of dollars that we don't have. This is the problem with the defense budget today. It's not about helping the warfighter. It's about making defense industry and Congress richer.
So now we get into alternatives, like I'll show it up here. Anduril. Anduril is the guy, Lucky Palmer, that did the Oculus Rift, that then got bought for a couple $1 billion by Facebook or whoever gave Facebook money. So here he's got tons of money. Ooh, we're going to build us some. I went from Oculus Rift and virtual reality into we're going to make us some missiles. And we're going to have fighter drones, and we're going to have, all kinds of, and it's inexpensive and whip ass and kind of a private something. So I'm wondering, I don't know what to think of this. What do you think of this? Are you familiar with this kind of our own military private off the shelf ordering kind of thing?
Yeah, it's supposed to be about improving, accessibility to technology and lowering prices. But all it does is put money in the hands of industries that will not produce anything of value to the American warfighter. Look, war isn't supposed to be cheap. The weapons aren't supposed to be affordable. The weapons are supposed to enable a well-trained American warrior to kill his enemy on the field of battle. And but what's happened here is that we've become, first of all, go ahead and read these they make no sense. Reliable, flexible, autonomous underwater vehicle enables safe and successful access to the greatest depths of the world's oceans. But can it get a Navy SEAL detachment from point A to point B? Some of the other language up there, AI empowered this, that, and the other, it means nothing. When you read a paragraph and you're sitting there going, what did they just say? It means they said nothing. And their job, how Anduril and the Army are rewriting with, what was that, NG2C. What does that mean, NGC2? That's going to be some fancy acronym for some concept that some defense contractor drew up in a boardroom to confuse the American taxpayer to put money into this. Will an artillery round hit the target in a timely fashion when somebody pulls the lanyard? That's the question. None of this other garbage.
Well, this is the point that I'm making with this is that their policies conjure up different alternative solutions to the efficiency of blah blah blah. It's like NASA, gazillion dollars with a disposable rocket, and here comes Starship, and we're land it and refuel it. You know, it's just the mindset has been expensive, 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 expensive. Keep the line open. Expensive jobs, congressional elections, expensive, and then it gets to all right. Well, we got another way of doing it over here, and we'll. But then I'm going. Yeah, I'm not sure how. You know, like other countries do it. Is it a private thing? Is it kind of part of the military? It's Lockheed Martin Skunk Works has become the military. I'm like, damn, are we ever going to ratchet down away from all this stuff? Well, this is what your job was. We're going to inspect. We're going to enforce a treaty to de-escalate, to take nuclear weapons off the field. It seems, and this is what I'm building up to, I wanted to, we can get into the actual wars, is that NATO and whatever the shit is behind that wants a freaking war with Russia. They're going, we're going to get us some Moscow. And to think that Moscow was going to go, oh, okay, when the deal is that they weren't going to start scooping up countries to join NATO on the border with Russia, and that they told them what was going to happen. They did it because they wanted it to happen. And I'm going, who's in charge? What are we up against as American citizens, as taxpayers, as our families and futures, and wanting to get out from under the mushroom cloud? I'm going, a lot of the things that we're starting to diverge into on how the military is funded, how it's prioritized, where the equipment comes from, how it's tested, how we're trained, where we allocate resources, how we bring up American citizens even give a crap, to go and see that they have some kind of, do they have an obligation to a country, this geographical, whatever the hell, the Pledge of Allegiance every day. All these questions come down to there is a war mentality, fear to control the taxpayers and money and allocation by somebody somewhere for something, and it's United Nations, it's Israel, it's NATO, and the boogeyman is Russia. Is Vladimir Putin the boogeyman? Or is there a real threat there or a potential ally? They don't want to ally with Russia. China's our new best friend right up until they're not. So I'm wondering what is going on from your perspective, Scott. Thanks for all this background on you, on your opinion on the military, where we're at, the allocation of it. Now let's get down to the boots on the ground thing. The Ukraine war was such a staged thing, and we're supporting the literal Nazis of the whatever, and what'd you think, they were going to do in Crimea, warm water port in the Black Sea. They were going to never give that up. And then you have, it's just, all this stuff was so manipulative. Who's behind it? Are there generals that are, I'm with whatever Lockheed says? I'm wondering, what are we up against? What wicked this way is here? Help us out, Scott.
First of all, we need to, the Ukraine conflict didn't begin in 2022 when the Russian government ordered Russian troops into Ukraine. It didn't begin in 2014 during the Maidan coup, CIA-backed coup. It didn't begin in 2004 with the first CIA-backed color revolution. It didn't begin in 1991, 1992 when we were working with Ukraine to help dissolve the Soviet Union. We have to go back to the end of the Second World War. When a decision was made that we would be seeking to contain the Russians. A lot of people won't, and I'm sorry for the history, but this has to be told. There was an organization called the Gehlen Organization. Basically, it was the Nazi intelligence organization for the Eastern Front, run by a Nazi general named Gerhard Gehlen. He ran, among many things, networks of Ukrainian nationalists, Banderas, loyal to Stepan Bandera, who fought alongside the Nazi forces, who pulled the triggers in Babi Yar, killing 40,000 Jews, who carried out the murders of the Jews, who in 1943 carried out the Volyn massacre, slaughtering 130,000 Poles, murdering 200,000 Russians as they controlled this territory. Gehlen ran these guys as part of an anti-communist resistance. After the Germans withdrew, the intelligence organization continued to work with these guys. When the war ended, Gehlen should have been arrested, tried in a court, and hung by the neck until dead because he was a war criminal, a literal murderer, and so too was just about everybody in his organization. But instead, the United States Army absorbed his organization in totality, and we had a process that was done where we started whitewashing German officers who had criminal records, people responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of civilians. We just whitewashed that and said, they're the good Germans. They're not bad, because we needed Germany now to be able to create a military to join NATO, which was designed to confront the Soviet threat. And so we literally recruited Nazis. And the CIA took over, the Gehlen organization took over the Ukraine front in 1947-48. We did an operation where we were supplying Ukrainian nationalists, Nazis, literal Nazis, the Banderists who fought alongside Nazi Germany, were now being supported by the CIA to create havoc against the Russians. And from 1945 until 1954, 55, we supplied them, worked with them, trained them, organized them, directed them. Now, the Soviets eventually defeated them in the field of battle. It cost the Soviets around 40,000 dead. Over 200,000 civilians were killed during this time. It was very heavy fighting. But they kicked out 200,000 of these guys. They fled to the West. Many of them came to the United States, by the way. Some of them lived just down the road from me in Ellenville, New York, where they run a Banderist summer camp. Every summer, they bring in 3 classes of youth who wear Nazi uniforms, parade around with torches carrying the portrait of Stepan Bandera, singing songs loyal to Banderist and Nazi ideology. Right here in the United States, it's happening. And these people grow up to go to Washington, D.C. as part of the Ukrainian Congress to advise the American government on how to proceed when it comes to Ukraine and Russia. You see, we've been using Ukraine forever as a tool against Russia, to destabilize Russia, to bring down Russia.
Okay, we who? This is, when you say that, I'm going, is it an intelligence community? Is it a company of? Is it a political party of? Who is doing this?
Well, remember, the CIA acts it works for the President of the United States. And so the CIA does that which the president tells them to do. And the president, every single president from the
when
end
it's
of the
convenient for them and whoever's controlling that. Do you really think the CIA is controlled by the President of the United States? Is that I mean, I'm looking at Comey, I'm looking at Brennan, I'm looking at Pointers, I'm going, man, I don't think there was a whole lot of presidential control there. Well, then unless they were on the same team.
That's the fault of leadership. But one of the problems we have is that we have not a problem, but the way the American system works is we have elections every 4 years. Sometimes a president gets reelected, so they have an 8-year term, but a lot of presidents don't. When you join the CIA, you spend a career in the CIA. And so you can spend 30, 40 years in the CIA working for, 6, 7, 8 different presidents. So become a permanent fixture. The president becomes a temporary fixture. So it's very difficult to speak about absolute control because no president fully controls an establishment that operates in the shadows in secrecy. The CIA begins a project under one president and then continues the project, maybe doesn't brief the next president about the totality of what's happening. And next thing you know, we have an entire, conglomeration of secret activities and secret wars being waged that the President of the United States doesn't know about.
We're on the beach in Cuba. Where's our air support? I get it.
That kind of thing. But the point is, every president supported the CIA's operations against Russia. Every president, including Donald Trump, who today claims that he wants to have peace with Russia, but while he was president, ordered the CIA to build 20 bases inside Ukraine to carry out covert operations targeting Russia, who he claimed he wanted to be friends with. And this is the problem. We've never really wanted to be friends with Russia. We've always used Russia as the big boogeyman.
Why? Trump goes on about how buddies he is with him and Kim Jong grandson. They're going to build condos on the beach in North Korea, and Shenzhen is the greatest city ever, and all this other stuff. And I'm going, to what end? What is is that just a distraction? Is that to put them off key? Are they really trying to bring them into the geopolitical economic zone of we're all getting along, kumbaya? Or there is a mission that I'm seeing Trump, now that he is in and getting a little bit better press and has MAGA and all this other stuff, that we do the Trump Report every Thursday since he came down the escalator. Now, Dr. Tambury that wanted to do, don't be a hater, Ernie. I want to, he's a supporter. And I'm going, fine. I can say you're still voting a bunch of times. I don't care. Because I don't delegate my authority to any one other person that's going to make decisions for me and my family. I just don't see that, as my mindset. I'm libertarian, leave me alone. But the point is that I don't know who's really in charge. Trump likes to think he is. He goes to the UN. This last speech he did at the UN, I wasn't a big fan of. The first two that he had done before, I thought were really good. But that's not really how he's acting. Is it a play? Is it a pressure thing on Vladimir? Is it, there's something else going on, sneaking all of a sudden you're bombing Iran? I mean, I'm wondering who's in charge, Scott? What interests are really going? Or is it just some amorphous military, the industrial intelligence community of what the hell they want from the banking system? I mean, I have no idea. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, Dwight Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial congressional complex. Look, we created a Russian threat at the end of the Second World War to justify continuing with a large army and continuing to maintain defense industries. Most Americans don't remember, don't realize that we entered the Second World War on the heels of a Great Depression, that our economy wasn't the greatest economy ever. We had a lot of societal problems. And then the Second World War came along, and we were able to nationalize defense, and we were able to, get everybody employed and send 12 million guys off to war and come back. And the problem is, what happens when you take these 12 million guys, demobilize them, bring them back into the economy? The economy still had some fundamental issues dating back to the time of the Great Depression. So what you do is you have to maintain a war-type economy in a time of peace. In order to do that, you have to have an enemy. And the enemy was the Soviet Union. And, you go into the 1950s, the Red Scare, McCarthyism was all part of the same thing. We needed to demonize Russia, demonize the Soviet Union to justify the fear or to create the fear to justify the defense budgets. Look at the bomber gap made up by the CIA. Made it up. The Russians have more bombers than we do. We have to start building bombers. And we started building bombers so that Symington, a senator from Missouri, could fulfill his promise to make money for the defense industry. Then we had a missile gap. The Russians have more missiles. We got to build missiles. So we did that. And we kept going all the way through the Cold War. Then the Soviet Union went away. We built NATO. NATO's job was predicated on confronting the Soviet threat. But now the Cold War ends. How do you justify NATO? How do you justify the continuation of NATO? How do you justify the level of spending you have to keep the Russian threat? Or you have to destroy Russia. The 1990s was about destroying Russia. People need to understand what happened in Russia after the Cold War ended. The United States went in there and we literally robbed them blind. We didn't go in to build democracy. We went in to destroy Russia, to ensure that whatever Russia would be would not resemble the Soviet Union. We wanted to make sure that this massive nation that had all the resources in the world could never get its act together again to stand up and confront the United States. We picked Boris Yeltsin, a notorious alcoholic, to be the president. This man wasn't a Democrat. In October of 1993, he put tanks in the streets of Moscow to fire on the Russian parliament and kill Russian parliamentarians. That's the equivalent of Donald Trump putting M1 tanks to fire on the Congress of the United States and kill Congress because they didn't agree with him. That's not democracy. That's a dictatorship, and we sustained that dictatorship. We bought an election for Boris Yeltsin in 1996. I don't want to hear a single American talk about Russia did this, Russia did that. We bought a damn presidency in 1996. And then the Russians made the greatest sin ever. They decided they didn't want to surrender. During the 1990s, the things got so bad because of American economists going in and talking about how to rebuild, empower the oligarchs, the whole thing. The pensioners, the men and women who fought in the Second World War, who saved the world from Nazi Germany because the Soviet Union, engaged 80% of the Nazi army, 60% of it. We don't like to talk about that. But these people are now pensioners. They lost their pensions. And you know what happened to the old guys who lost their pensions? The mafia gangs preyed on them. They went in there and they killed them. They murdered them. Now their apartments are empty, and then they pay off the police and the mayor to make it an abandoned property, and then the mafia buys it at pennies and sells it for dollars. Millions of Russian pensioners died this way. Millions of people died from alcoholism because there was no hope, there was no future. Millions of people committed suicide. This is the reality of Russia in the 1990s. It was a horrible time for the Russian people, worse than the Great Depression was for the American people. And then a man stepped up, was appointed president by Boris Yeltsin, who stepped down because he realized, well, I don't know.
No, we're good. We're good. I just bandwidth thing.
Okay.
Go ahead.
You know, and this man named Vladimir Putin stood up and said, Russia will not bend the knee. Now, he didn't say Russia's going to take over the world. He just said Russia's not going to bend the knee. No, I'm not playing that game. He actually went to Bill Clinton and said, hey, you know, we could be friends. Why don't you invite us to join NATO? Since the Cold War is over, we'll join NATO. And Clinton went, nah, that's not going to happen. You see, because Clinton recognized you needed Russia to be the enemy in order to justify all the crap that was all the expenditure of money. But then the Russians said, we're not going to surrender. And they stood up. If you compare what Russia was in 2000 when Vladimir Putin took over to where it is today, the transformation is unbelievable. It's a modernized country with a functioning economy. They're more capitalist than we are. They have a better standard of living than most Americans do. The Russians are doing A-OK, not because they're taking over the world, but because they said we're going to optimize the Russian, advantages in resources, etc., and they're doing quite well. That makes us mad. That's why we do what we do, because we don't want Russia standing on its own 2 feet. We want Russia that's willing to bend the knee, to lay down, to surrender to us, and they won't. Vladimir Putin's not a dictator. He's been elected. He's a Democrat. Russia's not a Jeffersonian democracy. You can't make a direct comparison. But what we've done is demonize Vladimir Putin, because we can't have Russia being a nation that we could possibly be friends with, because how else do you justify?
What kind of threat are they really? Are there spy cells of going in and buying Facebook posts of kind of all the Russia Gate stuff? I mean, it's just, you have no idea what the real, I would think that if I was, I don't know where he is, premier or whatever, the Soviet Union, I would go, we're going to need to pay, some double agents. We're going to need to have some presence. We're going to get involved in the election law. We're going to get involved on, just like, with Netanyahu coming out, it's social media. We got to take it over, man. We're going to, they're just recently coming out doing that. So if Vladimir did just half of what Netanyahu's threatening to do, whoa, man, we're under attack from. So I'm just wondering what the legitimate concern we have of Russia, the Russian government, the Russian intelligence community, the Russian military, the Russian goals is a threat to Europe or the U.S. Is it real? Is a lot of it in defense? Do we need a new, the next James Bond movie is going to explain it to us? I mean, where are we at with the threat from Russia? And then it's Russia and China, it's Russia, but Russia. Is Russia a threat to the U.S.?
Short answer is no. Russia's not a threat to the United States of America unless we make it a threat. Meaning if we attack Russia, Russia will.
We're working on it.
Right. But Russia will defend itself, and Russia has built some of the finest strategic nuclear weapons the world has ever seen, not because they wanted to. It was because we forced them to. We withdrew from the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty in 2002. We began to build missile defense systems that were designed to intercept Russian missiles. We used to live under what's called mutually assured destruction, that you can't win a nuclear war, so let's not fight it. And everybody agreed that was good. But we decided we wanted to fight and win a nuclear war, so we started building missile defenses. And Vladimir Putin warned us about it. He said, don't do this, please. It's stupid. It's wrong. We don't need to do this. We don't want to do this. But we wouldn't listen. So he began researching and developing new missiles designed to defeat not just the current U.S. missile defenses, but anything future. Today, Russia has the most advanced strategic ballistic missile arsenal in the world. They can defeat anything we create. Golden Dome will not.
Hypersonics, yeah.
Hypersonics, missiles that go through the South Pole instead of the North Pole, the whole thing. But they won't use them unless we start a war. They're defensive weapons in general. But let's examine this problem from this perspective. Did Russia buy an American election? I mean, because you've heard the reports. They bought Facebook bots. They did this. Do you remember Bloomberg, the mayor of New York?
Yeah.
He ran for president.
Yeah.
He spent $1 billion building the greatest technologically savvy social media team the world has ever seen. He spent $1 billion building this team and pouring money into influencing the Americans. He bought every Facebook ad possible. He did TikTok. He did the whole thing, the whole schmeal. He did it better than anybody, poured $1 billion into it. He won what? One electoral vote in some remote Western Samoan island. So now we compare and contrast that. And these were Americans who knew the system. And they couldn't change the American voters' mind. And now we're supposed to believe that some Russian housewife sitting in a building in St. Petersburg buys up $100,000 worth of Facebook ads. And this is a direct threat to American democracy. My God, this woman who talks about things, uses bad English, and posts a meme up there that promotes a demonstration that already took place. She altered the course of history and moved the needle. This is stupidity in the extreme. The Russians didn't want to interfere. We know this now. This is the danger of the intelligence community the way it is. You know, President Trump went to Alaska to meet with Vladimir Putin. You remember that? That just recently happened. He was briefed by a senior CIA person, the National Intelligence Officer for Russia and Eurasia Affairs, or former, on the way there. She was telling him about Russia, about this, about that, about that. Her name was Julia Gaganis. And she was the person shaping the president's mind to meet with Vladimir Putin. She was also the National Intelligence Officer for Russia and Eurasian Affairs in 2016 when she manufactured the case against Russia about interference in the American election. She knew it was a lie. They all knew it was a lie. And now Tulsi Gabbard's out there proving it was a lie. But she is somebody who said, I will lie to the American people to make it look like the Russians were supporting Donald Trump because I am more loyal to Joe Biden than I am to Barack Obama than I am to the United States Constitution. I am more loyal to Hillary Clinton than I am. Now, I have no problem with people saying I want to vote for Biden, I want to vote for Clinton. That's your business. You're an American. Vote for whomever you want. But she, as a senior CIA agent, along with John Brennan and everybody else, James Clapper, FBI, they all lied. They made stuff up about Vladimir Putin, about Russia, about a threat that didn't exist in order to shape the mind of the American people into believing that the Russians are a threat worthy of confrontation. Vladimir Putin's not a threat to the United States. He just did a presentation at the Valdai Club in Sochi, Russia, where he spoke for about 30 minutes, a very impressive speech. But then he spent 3.5 hours answering questions without notes. And every answer he gave was a PhD in, international diplomacy. This is one of the smartest men in the world, one of the most capable leaders in the world. He took Russia from nothing and made it to what it is today. Is he a threat to the United States? Absolutely not. Should we be friends with Russia? Absolutely. These are the last people in the world you want to be enemies with, and there's no reason to be enemies with these people. They don't threaten us. They're not trying to threaten us. It's not Russia that's threatening to build 800,000 strong military to begin a war in Europe. That's NATO. Atrophied NATO, fat people, been on the couch. They haven't been lifting weights, and now they think they're going to go into the boxing ring against a man who has been training to defend himself. This is crazy. This is a NATO-driven conflict because NATO doesn't have any justifiable reason to exist.
It wasn't just NATO, though. During the Obama administration, the way this worked, all right, I'll give you a little background so that people understand my frame of mind. During 9/11, after that, before we actually go into Iraq and all this kind of stuff, you'd have, Rumsfeld or Cheney or something get on the Sunday morning shows and go, look, this story that's in the New York Times that was a reprint or kind of talking about the story that Rupert Murdoch did in his newspaper in Australia, that's the only way we could get it in because we can't, it's illegal to propagandize the United States citizens. That is illegal. You can propagandize everybody else. You can lie and BS all you want, but not us. We can't. Obama changed that. Well, yeah. We do, for national security, if I want to, we can propagandize the American populace. I'm going, what the crap is that? I am paying for my government to lie to me. Well, part of those lies is building up phantoms and enemies and whatever, which I guarantee Putin, falls into that category. So this is right there. I know I'm being BS'd. We're BSing you. We just want to make it legal. You know, if they're going to make it legal, they're already doing it. They just want to make it legal. They want to grease the skids, make it easier. We don't have to publish in Guatemala first before we can, write about it here. So how far off am I? I mean, it's institutionalized, and I'm going, who are these people? It's a philosophy. It's got what's his name? That from the early '80s. J. Edward Griffin interviewing him doing different presentations. He was KGB. He goes, look, this is how we're going to infiltrate the core of what it is to be American. We're going to redefine this. Attack the family. Go after. It's all a psychological thing. Well, it's like the United States and they, them, those that won't leave me alone. They, who are they, you conspiracy, Ernie, tinfoil hat wearing, whatever? They, who are they? There are those that just want to be left alone, and there are those that just won't leave them alone. That's who they, them, those are. I call them T3. T3's out there not leaving me alone, using my money to do it, and making it legal to BS me. So when you talk about Russiagate and them doing the elections and Cambridge Analytica and blah, 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 is it the truth? I don't know. It's legal for them to lie to me. When you do domestic stuff with the FBI and law enforcement, they go, well, he lied to me. And they got, the Supreme Court says government can lie to you. They can get you to do whatever. Now, sorry, sucks for you. You believed them. We are being trained not to believe our government. It's essential not to believe our government if you want to get at any truth. And they made it legal to lie. So anything that comes out of this, you got to look to the fruits of what they're doing, what their incentives and motivations were. It was like neon flashing obvious that you keep pressing east and you start putting military and assets and bases and missiles. This is how the Cuban Missile Crisis started. The resolution to that was, all right, we'll take Turkey missiles out later. We'll be nice. Well, then you have Robert McNamara. He does the Fog of War, a documentary movie they did, which I thought was interesting years ago. And what happened? They go, well, if we just, doing a little postmortem and talking about what happened, the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Vietnam War and all this stuff, talking with different generals. He goes to Cuba and Fidel Castro's there and he says, hey, if those missiles were operational, would you have used them? He goes, they were operational. Not only will we have used them, we're going to Brezhnev, can we use them? Well, what would have happened? You've been totally annihilated. He goes, yeah, so what? Screw you. We have no idea what we're messing with. So I'm looking at the goal. They have NATO, military industrial complex. Is it really that simple? Are they so sociopathic, lacking of empathy, love, compassion, give a crap what happens to anybody else, and they just want to get their new BMW, that they're willing to go to thermonuclear war to get what? Who are these people? What is their mindset? It's like we got to have a personality test to find out if they even got any empathy in their brain. So what are we really? Skip all the other crap. What are we really up against, Scott?
Well, first of all, the notion that Obama invented lies, the whole WMD thing was a lie told by the three presidents before Barack Obama. George.
Yeah, but it wasn't legal then.
No, they certainly lied to us, and they got away with it, and there were no consequences to lying. But what Obama did is it's reflective of, you had mentioned earlier about technology. We were entering into a digital age during the Obama administration. And, when he began to, for instance, the whole concept of the Russian reset, if you remember that, when Hillary Clinton ridiculously presented the red button to Sergei Lavrov and we're going to reset relations, that was a lie. Because what we were seeking to do is regime change, to remove Vladimir Putin from power, replace him with Dmitry Medvedev. But we were going to call it the Russian reset, resetting our relations. But we had to lie to everybody, the Russians, the Americans, the Europeans, all about this, because it's about destroying Russia, bringing down Russia. At the same time, we had a guy named Jared Cohen. You may not know the name, but he was he was an official that worked initially in the Bush administration, transitioned over into the Obama administration under Hillary Clinton. He came up with an idea called digital democracy. And digital democracy is where the United States was going to use social media to transform reality in the Middle East, to implant certain ideas into Iran. I talk about it in the Iranian book. And so it was all a lie. Everything became a lie. And it did begin under the Obama administration, the institutionalization of lying. And this is the problem, because nothing we're being told is the truth. And it's systemic. The lies we talk about Russia aren't just invented by the CIA. These lies are promulgated by academia because there's a revolving door. Go look at Columbia University, Harvard University, MIT. Look at Georgetown University, Stanford University, all these big universities that produce the next generation of American diplomats and leaders. And look who's teaching the next generation. They're all former CIA officials, intelligence officials, whose whole job while they're in the CIA was to lie to us about the threat posed by Russia. Yeah. I mean, this is the level of ridiculousness that exists. And it's not just academia that's lying and training these people. It's the media, because look at who the talking heads are. Look where their money comes from. Everything, the government, the media, academia are all poisoned by what I call Russophobia. Basically, they are trained from the very beginning to tell lies about Russia that generate fear about Russia, to create a fearful American public whose fear can then be exploited by the powers that be to promulgate policies that otherwise wouldn't pass muster. The average American's not stupid. The average American, when confronted with the truth, will make the right decision. But the average American isn't in a position to discern the truth when all they've been spoon-fed from the very beginning are a whole bunch of lies by the media, by academia, by the government, about everything in the world today. The government doesn't tell the truth about anything. It's incapable of telling the truth about anything. And anybody who dares stand up against the government will pay a very heavy price. Look, I have been speaking out against Russophobia for some time now. I've been trying to tell the truth about Russia, to say that, Russia's not a threat worthy of war. Last summer, 40 FBI agents came knocking at my door to issue a subpoena, a search warrant. They were accusing me, American Marine, of being an agent of the Russian government. What was my crime? Simply saying we shouldn't go to war against Russia. But that's not the thematic that the government wanted to hear. Now, there was an election, and a new president came into power. The FBI returned to my house a few months ago, started to return the material they stole. But what they said wasn't, we're sorry, we were wrong. They just said, yeah, there was a new election. There's different priorities now, which, talks about the importance of the vote, getting a president in there that reflects values that we agree in. But it also talks about the danger of living under a president who believes that he can use the FBI to silence people who speak out against policies that are all founded on a foundation of lies.
Founded on a foundation of lies to what?
Make people rich. What are you talking about? The whole
boom.
The Congress.
No, I'm saying
look,
boom. That's the answer.
Congress. Let's say I run for Congress and I'm making a whopping $100,000 a year doing whatever I do, and I get into Congress and I start playing their games, and by the end of my first term, I'm worth about $600,000. But now I win a second term. By the end of that, I'm worth $35 million. How did that happen? How did that happen? Because that happens to everybody in Congress. Yep. Just look at their money. They all make money. Look at the businesses that are associated with making Congress rich. This is about money. This is about power. It's not about the truth. They need war and the threat of war to create enemies, and they're always searching for enemies to justify the policies that they are undertaking. It's not about saving or preserving life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the American way, or democracy. It's about making rich people richer, and the people that pay the price are the average American, who, unfortunately, unless they listen to programs like yours, they're clueless. They work very long days. They come home, they sit down in front of a TV, they turn it on, and you have informational cocaine. It just flows straight into their brain and it numbs them, and they watch that. Then it turns into entertainment, and they get distracted. Then they go to bed, they go to work, they come home, more informational cocaine. And we're teaching generations of Americans not to think, not to empower themselves with knowledge and information, to rely on other people to tell them what to think, how to think, what to support, how to support it. That's not right. If the United States is going to function as this constitutional republic we're supposed to function as, we need an electorate, we need the American people to be smarter than the average bear, to be empowered with knowledge and information so they can make the right decisions on electing the right people and hold those people accountable for what they do in our name.
Is that happening?
No, it's not. It doesn't mean.
Well, is it, is there a hope? I mean, is starting, I'm seeing, I do a lot of shows. I've been doing radio since, started Terran Radio here in the Valley, in Phoenix area in '03. Freedom's Phoenix has been going on since '05. We did the Revolution. We were political activists, libertarian, made Wall Street Journal, Arizona, the libertarian state. I mean, it's kind of, stuff in the 90s. I've been nose to grindstone, ran for office gazillion times, Congress 3 times, against McCain, U.S. Senate, Secretary of State a couple times. Yep. Get up on there, and I get all Scott Rittery on them. I mean, let me tell you about it, okay? I have seen with the expansion and the broadbandness of the internet that there's Scott Ritters out there. There's a bunch of people out there. The truth button is on your computer keyboard. You just got to push it. The future is about credibility. Who do you believe? Well, it's a Wikipedia said. Well, I don't give a crap what they say anymore. Maybe on some kind of Finchburn or something, or kind of whatever. But you get into ideology, man, you got to go through the gambit of no conservative libertarian, and it really was an attack on libertarian philosophy. That was early on. Libertarians dominated the internet in the 90s, early 2000s. They definitely had to target that logic and reason thing. Hell no. Because the left side, the right side of the pyramid, you get up high enough, of the Republican, Democrat, whatever, left, the right, you get high enough, it's all C&I if we control both sides. That's where I say, I'm like, yeah, whatever. You're still voting? In fact, that was my sign in '06 when I went for Secretary of State in Arizona. Still voting? With the V in voting, the V for vendetta. Big question mark. I'm like, look, you think voting is going to make you free. You have not been paying attention. But I advocate for an accurate vote. Before you get to that, you're just whistling. I don't care. We have to have an accurate representation, like you're saying. The American people, I have way more faith in the wisdom of the crowd of the American people than a lot of people may, because they're looking at that number. It's like, what's the number we see every day, all day, driving around? It's the gas prices on every corner. We get that's the only number they're looking at. They judge everything by that, or the grocery store, or something like that. What about the people's opinion? That's not, the polls are screwed up, the texting thing. It's all BS. It's all manipulation. But given the facts, given the information, it's 20 years later. We're just now starting to find out what the hell really happened with 9/11. Now, a bunch of us already knew. We're going, really? Well, this is going to be, really? When this comes out, really? Well, now you have people that weren't even born then coming up going, wow, that was a bunch of BS. What? Yeah. Same thing with Ukraine. Same thing with China. Same thing. But inside of all that, there may be real threats. And we wouldn't know or believe it if it happened anyway. The credibility of government, of the networks, of broadcast media, of even influencers is going away. But it's being replaced with people that don't give a crap if you're banned or canceled or deplatformed. Hell, you're not worth listening to unless you were. So I'm going, this is so at a turning point in my life. We're the same age. I grew up, here in Arizona since I was 12, Florida before that. I graduate high school in 79. I do, a semester or two of college, and I'm kind of, this is not, I'm going through affirmative action, and we got to learn Ebonics and English 101, and I'm like, whoa, everybody thinks all this stuff just started. It started a long time ago. This has been a constant pressure of eating out the substance, harassing the population. That's why this show is Declare Your Independence, because that document really hit home with me. The purpose of government, using whatever military, the purpose of government is defense of individual rights. When it doesn't do that, it's time to alter or abolish. It's your right. It's your duty. So I'm going, sign me up. I'm good with that. But then all of these people, all these ideologies, and all of this effort, and all of our money goes towards not that. It's to service something else. And whenever you delegate authority to a politician or a government or a law enforcement or whatever, you take it away from you. I'm not delegating my authority over myself, my life, my family, my property, my liberty. My pursuit of happenstance, of my circumstance, of happiness is not like an emotion. It's more the control over your life, to change your happenstance, to work your land, to be able to grow, to educate your children. All of that, we are being conned to take it away in the name of what? Vladimir? I'm going, what if, can I read? It's like Israel. Well, Israel, says this about that, and Charlie Kirk doesn't like it, so, he's dead. And I'm going, can I do the Charlie Kirk thing? Raise my hand. Can I raise my oh, Mr. Cotter. Mr. Cotter, I got a question. Am I allowed to not care? Oh, wait a minute. I don't know if you're allowed to not care, So this is why I wanted to have you on, as we are right at the precipice of somebody's going to push some button. And we are getting into what I do. Andrew, talking about, the future of whatever the hell they're going to do, and Andrew's the Return of the King's Sword and Lord of the Rings kind of, defend, because they're geeks. But the point is that we are getting closer and closer to slaughter bots. The closer and closer to, facial recognition of I push a button, drone, and, Terminator, robots, killer kind of. They go, oh, no, we'd never put guns on. I go, when they can take guns and use them, they're going on drones. Get over it. Fighter, wingmen for fighters. I mean, hell, the fact that they even got a guy up there in the F-35 controlling the drones might, make me feel a little better. But they're going to get past that. We don't need any of this stuff. We're just push-button warfare. And it's coming. And we're getting closer and closer to... Americans have not been at physical threat on the mainland for, since Civil War or something? I mean, really? So it's coming home, and it's going to turn into an economic thing. It's going to be economy stupid, and eventually, you want to know what's going to trigger it? It's going to be a food thing. It's going to be, it's not there, it's too expensive, I go hungry, bow, 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 and then they got you. So I need to understand, before you go, I want to have a Scott Ritter from you being up against this clash, this meeting of the bullets hitting the bullets, out in the world here, what we're really up against. It's just military, it's just money, it's just sociopaths. We got to give a test where they care if a little baby bird gets squished or not. I mean, it's some basic fundamental thing like that. What are we, could it be Satan? I mean, is it just evil? I go, freedom good, government bad, 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 bad. And I'm going, well, what am I saying? Bad people doing bad things that they know is bad. That's the definition of evil. I mean, we're up against evil. Look at this other thing that they're doing. Oh, I get to add another bad? I mean, it's up to 9 bads? I mean, I used to do that on the air. I mean, freedom, good, government, bad, bad, bad. They do something stupid. I got to add another couple more bads. Freedom, good, government, bad, 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 bad. I'm up to 7. I got to do AA bads. What the hell? I'm saying evil. Bad people doing bad things that they know are bad, that's evil. Are we up against evil? Is this a spiritual thing? Is that the solution? And when you get someone like, Charlie Kirk's a good example. Oh, my God, he's not full goose step in with Israel. You just wind up dead. Is that the message? What's the message that we should have of all this conversation that we had? And thank you very much for going back into the why you even care. Why you're this way. An upbringing. Mom and dad. A standard. An expectation. And then, you couldn't be true to yourself and do what they wanted you to do. And you understood your duty as an officer to do, truth, justice, American way, honor, and not be a lying sack of snot. So this is important stuff. So after this rant, I'm hoping you're understanding my frustration on what the solution is. The solution is what? Quit allowing bad to seep into your life. Quit supporting the system that's wanting to devour you. Occupy the land. Go out and build. Raise your own food. Raise your own children. Quit delegating to Uncle Sam authority that you should have over your own life. I am just, and we keep worrying about what's happened on the other side of the planet to our detriment. We're not safer. We're not better prepared. All right. Your opinion, man. Help me out.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I have answers, or if the answers I have will be, something you agree with. I
don't need to agree with it. I just want to know what you think. You're the one that's there.
I believe in the power of the American citizen. I believe in the power of American citizenship. I believe in what we purport to stand for. I believe in the Constitution of the United States of America. I also believe that the American people have punted too many times over the years, and that we have allowed people to take control of our lives. I believe that we have forgotten what it means to be a citizen. When I go back, and people have pulled this up, the civics test that was given to, I don't know, a ninth grade class in Kansas in sometime in the turn of the last century. And you go through that test and you realize that hardly anybody today could pass that test. I take the test that my wife took, and you asked earlier, I've been married for 34 years and I have twin daughters, 32 years old. We are a very happy family, a loving family. Both one daughter's married, pregnant. The other daughter's getting married. We are a functioning American family. My wife is from the former Soviet Union, from the Republic of Georgia. In order to become a citizen, she had to study and take a test. And I would say that, and you had to pass that test with 100%. I would say that your average American couldn't take that test and pass it. And if you can't pass that test, and it's almost all about civics and about the Constitution, then why do you call yourself an American if you don't know what it means to be an American, if you don't know how to define that, if you don't know what the Constitution is? And too many people say, I'm an American, I do this, I do that, I believe in it. But what do you believe in? Do you believe in the things you purport to believe in? Because if you believed in true freedom, then you wouldn't subordinate yourself to a government that dictates every solution to you. We are prisoners of a system that's been built by elites that is designed to imprison us. And yet we pretend that we're free. We pretend that we have, the ability to do what we want to do, but we don't. And we won't until we take control. You brought up something very important, and that is the power of the internet, the digital age. There's no reason why the average American should be prisoner to corporate media. Corporate media serves the same powers that buy the weapons, that promote the policies, that promote the wars, and then keep us electing the same people to office. Because, people criticize Iran. It's a theocracy. There's a religious litmus test. Well, there's a money litmus test to run for office in America. If you don't have the right people writing the right checks for the right amounts, you don't get elected to national level office. That's just a reality. You have to sell your soul. I was recruited by the Republican Party in 1999 to run for Congress in 2000, and they were going to pick a seat and make it safe. But all I had to do is say what they wanted me to say, as opposed to what I believed in, and I wasn't willing to do that. We have made too many compromises. The internet gives us the freedom to access information that isn't run through a government filter. Now, some of this information is garbage, and we have to be smart enough to understand that. But other information is run through a filter of people who give a damn about this country. I thank you for putting up my website, scottritter.com. I believe that I know I love my country. I know I'm a defender of my country, and I believe in the empowerment of the American citizen. And if the average American citizen is empowered with the knowledge and information, they will make the right decisions. And if enough American makes the right decision, there is hope that we can change the world we live in. But what I do know is this: if we wake up every morning and do the same damn thing over and over and over again, we're going to get the same result, which is this non-functioning American democracy where the FBI can't kick down the door of law-abiding citizens, accusing them of being foreign agents just because they disagree with the lies being told by the United States government. We have to change this system. And we have to start at home and change how we operate and function as citizens. And if we can do that, and we get enough citizens together who start thinking in a way independent of what the government wants them to think, then we can make the changes that are necessary. I do believe in the power of the vote, not the way it's currently manifested, but I do believe that if the right people go to the polls and make the right decisions, we get the right people in office, and that's the beginning of how we transform this country away from this nation ruled by political and economic elites are only concerned about putting more money in their pocketbook, and they're not concerned about the general welfare of the American citizen or the world we live in. We live in a world where there's other human beings out there. It's not an American-centric world. In order for America to thrive, to America to function, we have to peacefully coexist with this world. You know, there's something they call, I forget the name of it, when astronauts go up into space and they look back down on the planet, they realize how small the world is. They realize how fragile the world is, and they realize how fundamentally stupid the vast majority of the problems we manufacture for ourselves are. You know,
tiny blue dot. Yeah.
Pardon?
Tiny blue dot. Carl Sagan, when they turn Voyager around, and you see this tiny blue dot in space, you know.
And we have to realize that we've been gifted this life on this planet, and we need to do a hell of a lot better job than what we're doing right now.
Okay, let's go ahead and start wrapping it up on that. You know, that's a good place to kind of end on. As a libertarian activist throughout the 90s, 2000, you know, that's kind of, you know, how I'm identified probably most accurately, is there is if you're even going to have a government, what would be its traits? Well, it's there to support individual rights. It's not doing that. Well, I have it. You know, if they're the ones taking them away, I'm like, well, what do you say you do here, you know? So this has been, my answer has been taking care of you, your family, you know, your community. You owe, you know, to yourself, your family, your children, have children, propagate the species, go forth and multiply, educate them and being self-sustaining and, you know, not so blue-faced. I mean, these are basic, fundamental things. They have to come under attack. They, them, those, I won't leave you alone. The prosperity that comes with freedom makes a big, giant chunk of money. And woo, we go and have some tax revenue, or we got, you know, your 401k, your IRA, your pension, your whatever. We're gonna put it right in this here stable coin that's going to buy some treasuries, and it's ours now. Thanks for playing. So I mean, all of this is so obvious what's coming, and it has to be in an atmosphere of fear. It has to be in an atmosphere of us versus them. It has to be an atmosphere of 1984. We've always been at war with Eurasia. I mean, you know, this is not anything new. This is how it's done. And to have someone like you, Scott Ritter, come out and go, now, you know, I got an opinion. Well, we're going to muddy up Scott Ritter's name because he has an opinion that, you know, from a perspective of knowing, of being on the ground, being part of this apparatus that knows the truth, that shares the truth. So we got to make, it's like, you know, what was it? Enemy of the State with Gene Hackman and Will Smith. You know, that was, we're going to make him to where before anybody even hears the words coming out of his mouth, they know he's a liar. Well, they do that kind of stuff. So I'm going, okay. But I want his perspective. I want Scott to come on and share just some of the history, you know, of what's really going on and what forces we're up against. I'm still not really clear what it is, other than they're just motivated by, I don't know, their secret handshake club, they want to be in the front row in hell or something, you know, and get their dead bodies, I mean, through whatever means. So this is what I'm looking for as a political activist, to be there for my family and my grandchildren so they don't have to suffer the lies and deceit that come from these kinds of sociopaths and psychopaths. That they understand that they retain the power in themselves and their decisions and be an add to their community, to their family, to their county, their state, their municipality, whatever, you know, Sieg Heil allegiance they, you know, want to put in that. But at the very least, the smallest unit is the family and the individual. But the family is what perpetuates the species, and that is what's under attack. And it's under attack with lies and manipulation. And the further we go down this timeline, we find out how much it was. Since forever. You're going back to World War One, World War Two. We have the Cold War. We're going to what happened in Ukraine, in Europe, and NATO. What they're doing, and it's continuing on into the future until what? Until it stops. They, them, those guys. You think they would do this, Ernie? Are they a conspiracy theory of this thing and that thing? I go, I don't know. Can they? What do you mean? I don't know. Can they do a thing that will maintain and enhance and expand their intrusiveness and power over the American people? Because that's where the money is. Can they? Is it physically possible for them to do? Well, then they are. That's the only question I got to ask. Can they do this? They wouldn't do election fraud. That'd be wrong. I'm like, are you kidding me? So this is so simple for me. Your opinion is that we can trust the American people if they're informed. This internet thing is kind of, getting in the way of the left and the right. When you got Pam Bondi coming up, well, we have to regulate that hate speech stuff. And I know Scott Ritter's name on that list, So I'm just like, this is so obvious to me what has to happen. The change in society, and this is why I brought up the generals at the meeting or whatever stuff. It has to be a clear line between this is truth, justice, American way of certainly truth, justice, honor, that kind of stuff, and not. We're not going down this path, we're going down this path. Well, of course they'll say that. The Antichrist is going to come up and say what a peacenik he is. I mean, this. So how do you know? The future is about credibility. It's about who do you believe. It's about what you believe. Do you have any principles? So I want you to go ahead and, wrap it up for us in light of my rant there, is that I'm on board with you, brother. Peace. It's good. And all that. I mean, sometimes you got to defend what you love. It's more than, I hate this guy and you got to go lay waste. It's more about defending, what you love and your family and your community and so on. But it's over the horizon. I can't see it. I'm losing a lot of interest. Okay, just saying. So this is the best government to date. I believe the intent was to provide for the protection of the individual. That was, at least we had the intent. It's not Klingons or Vikings and how much loot I can go get and women I can rape. At least it was truth, justice, American way, and then that was the slogan for Superman, and then the woke whatever gets in truth, justice, and a better tomorrow. They actually changed Superman's slogan. I'm like, who are these people? That's what's got to be rooted out, and we have to get back to it. Are we on our way back? What do you think?
Well, let me start by saying this. I was commissioned in the United States Marine Corps in 1984, and from 1984 to 1998, so we're talking 14 years. I was entrusted with the greatest secrets my nation possesses. I was read into virtually every classified program. I functioned at very high levels with a great deal of responsibility. And in August of 1998, I decided that I wasn't going to play that game anymore because I couldn't lie. I couldn't tell the lies they wanted me to tell, they being the CIA, they being the United States government. I was called into the office. I was going to submit my letter of resignation as Chief Weapons Inspector for the United Nations in Iraq. And I was called into the office of the CIA station chief in New York. He works out of the U.S. mission there. I had known him for several years. His name is Larry Sanchez. It's no secret. And Larry called me in and said, are you really going to resign? I said, yes, I am. It's a matter of principle. He said, could you make a phone call to the National Security Council if somebody wants to talk to you and see if they can talk you out of this? So I made the phone call out of respect, and I listened, and we had a conversation. But at the end of the day, I would have to tell the lies they wanted me to tell, and I wasn't willing to do that. So I said, I'm going to submit my resignation. When we hung up the phone, Larry looked at me and said, we've been friends for a number of years and I respect you greatly. He said, but when you walk out that door, understand that our friendship is over. Not only that, he said, the FBI is going to target you for the rest of your life. And he used some very harsh language. They're going to do something to a certain part of my body. But then he said, and they're going to go after your family too. They're going to go after your friends. They're going to go after your colleagues. They're going to go after every aspect of your life. They will destroy you. They're going to ruin your life if you submit this resignation. This is from a very senior member of the CIA. And I said, so be it. And the FBI did their damnedest. It is, the history is the history. It is what it is. And the most recent manifestation was 40 FBI agents, including a 7-man tactical team coming through my front door to seize my electronics in order to intimidate me into silence. I have never backed down. I have never surrendered. I have never silenced myself. I have never done what the United States government wants me to do. And here I am today talking to you, a free man in my country. Yes, I mean, there's, baggage. But the bottom line is they can't silence me. They can't defeat me. They will not win. The only way they're going to silence me is to kill me. And they can't kill us all. And the reason why I'm telling you this story is the U.S. government has a whole bunch of tools, a whole bunch of power that they can use. But these tools and this power only works if you allow them to work. The worst thing the government could do is kill you, and they're not going to kill us all. Everything else, you can survive if you stand on first principles, if you stay true to who you are, to the truth. And that's what I've done. I'm here today talking to you. They haven't silenced me. They can't silence me. And they won't silence me unless they put a bullet into me, and I don't think they're going to go that route. So,
they say they can't kill us all. I mean, there was the pandemic. I mean, come on, man. You really swinging for the fences there.
But they didn't. But my point is, I'm just telling your audience to have faith in yourselves and have the courage of your convictions. That at the end of the day, if you stay true to yourself, if you stay true to your convictions, you will emerge victorious, because that's what this is about, is being true to yourself, staying true to your convictions. And if you do this and you're willing to put in to carry out the struggle, if you're not willing to surrender, I honestly believe we'll win. You said, is there hope? Yes, I have hope. I believe in the power of the individual. I believe in the power of the American people. I don't give a damn what people who don't know me think about me. I don't care what you read on Wikipedia. It's your problem, not my problem. My problem is what I do, is what I say, is how I behave, and what I believe in, how I function in accordance with those beliefs. And I'm very comfortable with who I am and what I'm doing. And fortunately, at this point in time, I believe there's a lot of people out there who share this level of comfort. And that's what we need. We need people to rally around truth. And if we rally around truth, I do believe that we will come out on top.
You have been persistent. You have been freaking there. You have been. Now, we put a lot of, probably, if you go on Freedom's Phoenix in our search bar at the top right and put in your name, it'll blow up all over the place. So we've been covering a lot of, your interviews and so on. So I've seen you quite a bit, and I know I just thought that we had done interviews back in 04, 5, 6, 7,
I think we
9.
did, because I did go to Phoenix, and I've been to Phoenix to promote anti-war message. So yeah, we probably talked about it back then.
I think we have, but I couldn't find it, before we started doing archive storage of all our shows the way we were, because it was being censored all the time on various platforms. This video taken down. Whoa, we're doing it all ourselves. IPF fast, we're never going away kind of thing. So we got this one, and this is a good show. Thank you. But the whole purpose of what we do, and this is why I wanted to make sure this got in. The whole purpose, the reason for Freedom's Phoenix, was for my children and grandchildren. From the ashes of Lady Liberty's torch, Freedom's rebirth, Freedom's Phoenix. I see what's coming. I am very optimistic in the future of abundance. I see that, but we have to what? Uncover the secrets and exposing the lies. I am just so sick and tired of being lied to. Freedom's Phoenix is, the radio show started in 03 here at Terran Radio out of Phoenix area. Then we went internet. Then we have Freedom's Phoenix started in 05. So for 20 years, we archived hundreds of thousands of articles on the perspective of activists like us of what's really going on. And you've been a part of that all that time. So I just want you to know that we've been paying attention, and it's because somebody that's willing, with the background that you had, to come out and say, this is what I know about that. Just saying. And they're lying. The final question, who's winning the Russia-Ukraine thing? Who's really involved? How wide is this? Where is it going? What's going to stop it? Trump? I mean, where do you think we are on that? And everybody's saying, yeah, Russia's on the ropes. They're losing. They're going to... They just never seem to go away. So what's your opinion on that war, where it's going, before you go?
First of all, this is a war that Russia didn't start. It was foisted on Russia by the United States, by NATO, by Europe, by Ukrainian nationalists. Russia is acting in a way that defends the interests of the Russian population, Russian-speaking population. And Russia is winning this war. But this isn't a war between Russia and Ukraine. This is a war between Russia and the collective West, between Europe, NATO, and the United States. People need to understand that Russia today is defeating an army that has been backed by hundreds of billions of dollars of the most modern weaponry and finances. Ukraine is not a functioning nation state. It is a 100% proxy of the collective.
We're paying for all their teachers' salaries. I mean, yeah.
Everything, the pensioners, all the corrupt money that goes into the bank accounts of the corrupt officials, that's our taxpayer money. Russia is waging a war of attrition. The way you win a war against the collective West is to wear the collective West down. And Russia is doing that. They are killing Ukrainian soldiers in unbelievable amounts. We're getting up close to the 2 million dead soldier mark. They're destroying all the equipment we send in, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of equipment. They're outproducing NATO by 4-1. That includes the United States. Russian defense industry is outproducing NATO. They produce better weapons. Everything you read about Russia, about this war, is a lie put forward by not just the Ukrainians, but by the CIA, by MI6, by European intelligence services. It's all an information operation. I've been to Russia. I've been to the Donbass. I've been to these regions. I will tell you that it's a very hard war. It's a very dangerous war. It's high-intensity conflict of the likes which the world has never seen. And you don't pour this much money in to create this NATO proxy military called the Ukrainian Armed Forces and not produce results. But the Russians, while they are taking losses, these are losses that Russia can sustain. These are losses that are not crippling Russia. Russia is getting stronger every day. Ukraine and the West are getting weaker. And this war will end sooner rather than later. And it will end with a massive, major Russian victory. A Russian victory, though, is defined by victory in terms of imposing its will on Ukraine, not about occupying the West. Russia does not want to go to war with NATO. They're not looking to go to war with NATO. But if NATO wants a war with Russia, then Russia will fight that war and NATO will lose that war. And if the United States wants a war with Russia, Russia will fight that war and then we all die. And I think the Trump administration recognizes this ultimate reality. And while they are playing political games, saying things, doing things, etc., I think that their overall focus is try to find a way to get past Ukraine and live, if not as friends, at least live in a world where we can be friendly to the Russian people and the Russian nation.
Why did Trump say, well, Ukraine can they probably take back some of their property, we go give them some more money and Europe can buy stuff which they reneged on, to get what? I mean, why did he shift?
I don't think he did. I mean, he said it, but let's look at the reality of it. Zelensky, together with the British and the CIA, put together a massive information operation timed for the United Nations General Assembly debate where he knew he'd have an audience with the American president. And he was trying to create the impression that Ukraine could win. They did this counteroffensive where and it's over, by the way. The Russians stopped it. The Russians are counterattacking and taking back everything, killing all the Ukrainians that were involved. But the idea was to create this perception that Ukraine could fight and win. Trump had said if he can't bring it into this war, he's going to walk away from it. So when he turned to the Ukrainians and went, hey, good on you. You guys, you say you can beat the Russians? Why don't you go ahead and take back all your country? And while you're at it, go to Moscow. But we're not paying for it. We're not giving you the weapons. We will sell weapons to NATO, and NATO can do what they want with those weapons. But the reality is we're not selling that many weapons to NATO because we have to use the weapons that we do produce to replenish our own stockpiles. So Ukraine gets nothing. And this is something that Kaja Kallas, the person running foreign affairs for Europe, recognized. She said that Donald Trump has walked away from Ukraine, has washed his hands of Ukraine, and has put the total onus of supporting Ukraine on Europe, and Europe can't do this. That's what Donald Trump did. People have to be careful about reading too much into his words because he is saying things to appease certain constituencies and certain power structures. But it's
that was it. That was his goal, to say, "Hey, I think you can do it. You go, man. One for the Gipper. You go, kick ass. I'll golf clap on the sideline." So that was kind of his mindset.
Yeah, he's walked away from it. Ukraine, first of all, he knows Ukraine isn't going to do that. Ukraine's losing right now. They're, like I said, continuing to retreat. They will never do any of the things that Trump said, but Trump was just telling Zelensky, if this is what you want to do, go do it. Go forth, conquer. But you're on your own. We washed our hands of it.
Well, I'd like to hear that wash my hands of it. That'd be good. But there's so much more we could do. We've already gone, 2 hours, 20 minutes, and I really appreciate the extra time that you've given me. It was penance for being 5-10 minutes late, slacker. I know you had some personal stuff. Your scheduler let us know. That's fine. But
I won't get into it, but let's just say that when I was supposed to be sitting in front of a computer, I was compelled to do other things. Remember that family we talked about?
I'm a fan of them already. I already know.
All right.
So this has been really, and we made a new friend, and hopefully you'll come back on. I don't. I really don't want to drumbeat this issue, but it's getting to the point. We need to know what's up from a different perspective that we have from Scott Ritter. Now, Scott's on, everybody's show all over the place, everywhere, so he's getting his opportunity to share. But this is probably a little bit different interview because I'm always wanting to know the why. Why do you care? Where did that come from? What kind of person are you? What do you say you do here and why? So to have this perspective and the knowledge of the history and the basis and the motivations, having learned Russian, having understood, lived there, getting the mindset, I keep asking what we're up against. And I think it's a lack of compassion, it's just, you create all these shiny badges, and then who wants to be in charge of them? The bad guys, the sociopaths, the people that are willing to do whatever it takes to maintain their position control over everyone. So quit creating shiny badges. I mean, I don't know how anarchist I want to go. The founders did a pretty good job of addressing a lot of this, but our Constitution was made for a moral people. You take that out, and then what do you got? You just got a big, giant, rich country because of their freedom. We are wealthy and have a high standard of living to the degree that we're free, which we're victims of our own success. Here come the bad guys. So I'm really glad that you're there, Scott, just adding a different perspective, and we're happy that you'll come back on. There may be, I don't know when, but it's going to be probably sooner rather than later. We won't go so far in between us talking. And we will let you know, and whenever you're available, I'm sure we'll be picking your brain. We'll focus more on the current events and news of the day. But we needed to do this introduction to each other and to our audience so that we knew who we were dealing with, what you know, your perspective, and then we'll get into the details of the current events and news the next time. Sound like a deal?
Sounds like a deal. And again, thank you very much for having me on. It's been a pleasure to talk with you and your audience.
Thank you. It was. Scott Ritter. Now, tell where everybody needs to go and get them some Scott Ritter. What's the best place?
ScottRitter.com. It's a one-stop shop. You go there and you can look at all my videos, anything I write. It's all there, and feel free to give it a try. ScottRitter.com.
Thank you, brother. Peace.
Thank you. Peace out.